Hello, this is an ad hoc screencast just to go over looking at channel maps for the EGI 256 channel recordings. Applies in many ways to other 256 channel recordings, but this is specific to EGI channel maps and variations that we have seen in some of those channel assignments. My name is Michael Guest, VP of Research and Clinical Applications for Persyst Development, and as always, happy to answer any questions through a web conference. But let's go ahead and get started. I've already opened up a recording, and I'm going to go ahead and note that I've selected the recorded montage. And if I go to the recorded headbox channels, this one's set to default. And so channels 1 through 259, although there aren't 259 channels in this recording, which is interesting as the label is, it goes 256, 58, 59, and so 257 has been skipped. Just one interesting thing, but these are just labels again, so that's actually channel 258 because that's what it says after the equal sign there. So the other thing I'm going to do is zoom in because these channel labels are too small to see. Let's go ahead and select the all button, and I'm going to knock that down to 32 channel. Let's go to 24, make them a little bit bigger. I'm going to scroll to the bottom of this list, and we'll note that 258 to VREF, that's the label, is an EKG channel, obviously, which is good. We like to have EKG channels available, especially if we're looking at spike detections, because if there's some EKG artifact in the EEG and that's getting marked, we'll see how to easily identify that in spike review and exclude those spike clusters. Let's go ahead and assign a channel map. So if I go to recorded and recorded headbox channels, so I'm picking the montage dropdown, and instead of fault, I'm going to go ahead and pick the EGI 256 extended 1010 relabel one. So I also only have the EEG displayed, not the EEG and the trends. And again, that's to keep the whatever the current channel map is to get loaded into memory. Version C won't have a problem with this if that's done, but for anything prior to that build, like version 14B or B1 through B3, go ahead and just show the EEG page so we're not switching channel maps with the trends displayed. And also, if you've already got trends calculated, you want to clear those using that clear button on the system button bar to get rid of those. But now these have 1010 labels, as well as an extended 1010 convention that was developed over at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, and I believe they published on that as well. So this is actually a very nice way to handle labeling and getting an intuitive sense of location for channels that fall between those 1010 locations. Now, what we have is 257 by default labeled as Z to CZ, and then EKG to VREF 258. So let's apply this and see what happens. So now what happens is we've got the channel labels applied, but the very bottommost one is EKG to VREF, and that's flat, and Z to CZ has EKG. So clearly the channel map for this particular recording is different than the way that the channel maps were developed for other locations and from a default template from EGI. So how do we address this? Well, we just have to reassign that label. And I've already done that. Let's go ahead and click the recorded button. And I'm going to go to recorded headbox channels. And I'm going to pick EGI 256 extend 1010 EKG, the standard one without the intermediate positions labeled with that extended convention. It's just EGI 256 1010 EKG. Both of these actually have, this is indicating that the EKG is assigned to a different input. And you can rename these to whatever you like. I'm going to go ahead and apply these. And we'll see that now this channel is EKG to VREF. And this channel down at the bottom, which is without signal, has that label, but it's not actually applied. So I'm going to close and reopen this record. And what that did is it saved the channel map. So when you close, that's when Persyst will save things. And if we scroll to the bottom of this, we can see that channel label 257, EKG to VREF. And if we zoom in on the vertical and scroll to the bottom. Then we can see channel 258 now is that flat channel, and EKG to VREF now is the EKG. So closing and reopening reloads the channel map and reapplies it. So now we can do processing of this recording. Now I'll go ahead and go to the split screen or the trend display. I want to make sure I pick the correct trend settings. So I'll go to Preferences, Trend Preferences, select Template File, and I'm going to pick this trend settings version P141010.mmx and select Open. OK, and we'll go ahead and process. So as always, processing an EGI recording is step one is to apply the appropriate channel map. Step two, close and reopen it so that channel map is saved and applied as soon as the recording opens. And thank you, Windows Defender. And then proceed with processing the recording. Now, something you'll notice here is we've got some EKG artifacts showing up in some of these channels, and we know that because it lines up just right with the EKG R waves. And we'll process this for a little bit. I'm going to pause the recording and let this get a little further on because I want to look at some montages and some of the preliminary results in Spike Review. All right, we've let this process a little bit more than 30 minutes of this record, so I'm going to go ahead and click pause here on the system button bar, and we'll see what we've got. Now, the first thing, if you're using the trends to look for changes in the EEG, which makes sense, one of the things to notice right off the bat is this is fairly low amplitude. I've got the gain set to 7, and for a recording with this many channels, usually you see a bit higher amplitude. So let's go ahead and click here on this badge for the scale, 0 to 4 microvolts. And whenever you see the trends being a bit faint or a bit dark, you can adjust the gain on these so you can see changes in the underlying EEG, or in the trends rather, that reflect the underlying EEG a bit easier. Something to notice, the versus baseline, I'll go ahead and page this back. There's the baseline that's set here that calculates the empirical null. And we're showing z-scores, red for positive z-scores, green for negative z-scores. Since this is based on that empirical null calculated from the EEG itself, you'll notice that you don't really have to adjust gain very much on these because it's showing a difference from that baseline, so it's normalized automatically. Okay, well, we're going to look at spikes, so let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and go to the EEG, and we'll bring up the comment list. You can go through comments this way, but there's a lot of detections, and so let's use Spike Review. But before we do that, let's page back a bit, and we can see where there's a number of spike marks on this page, and we don't have the EKG channel displayed. And so let's see what's happening here, because it looks, this is very periodic. It looks like that's EKG artifact. Makes it much easier if we can go to pick a one that has an EKG channel in it. And of course, you can add an EKG channel just by right-clicking on a channel, select Insert Channel, and I'm going to change the inputs here. So we'll scroll up to the E's, and there's EKG, and I'm just going to put this to CZ because that's the reference for this particular recording according to the channel map that we've applied. And I'm going to go ahead and change the gain here. And you can change filters if you like all that. So you can even change the color. Why not? All right. So now we have the EKG channel showing up along the bottom. I'll go ahead and move that down. Just click and drag. And this is showing inverted with the R waves going down. Of course, if you wanted to change that, you could just change the order of the inputs. So we'll change this to CZ, and we'll change this to EKG. And there we go. Now, when we click anywhere along on this, looking at the EKG input, we can see they line up with those pretty well. So those appear to be the EKG artifact showing up in the underlying waveforms. So how do you deal with that? Let's go ahead and go to our Spike Review program, and this will load up the spike detections by spike focus. I'm going to go ahead and make that full screen. I'm going to toggle off the maps for now, and I'm going to switch from the default montage that this opens with to a 1010 average 17 reference. Now we can see there's 126 detected here, and we can change this to a different montage and so forth to look at it in a bipolar or an average reference. First thing though is, again, we don't have the EKG channel here, so it's difficult to see which one of these clusters may be being triggered by the EKG artifact. So I'm going to select one that has the EKG channel already added, and again, in that previous screen we added the channel. You could save the montage and give it a different name and so forth. So now we can see that this average FT10, average of 126 detections, we see the EKG showing up in that as well. And if we wanted to add a separator to the bottom of this, we get a separator append, just right clicked at the bottom of that to move that up a bit. So there's the EKG channel right there, and since it's averaging in, whenever I see that, I'm pretty sure that these clusters here are going to be due to EKG artifact, and I can exclude those as a whole. So I went ahead and double clicked on that average, and I can quickly sweep through these and see that, yeah, these are all exactly lined up with an EKG channel, with an EKG QRS complex. So we'll go back to the overview. I can skip that. And I've got some other ones that are the same way. So I'm going to turn my attention to the ones that do not have an EKG averaged in and lining up perfectly. So let's go ahead and click on this next group. And you can see that the EKG shows up at the bottom, but it's not lined up with these detections, indicating that this is not being triggered by seeing spikes, because it's EKG contamination in the EEG waveform. So let's go ahead and double click on any one of these. We can zoom in on this, and since we're showing it in the montage that is the primary detection montage, you'll see where channels can be highlighted. But let's go ahead and switch to a bipolar, because one of the things that can be helpful is if you want to look at it in a different derivation to say, all right, am I still convinced that this may be a spike discharge or not? And that's one of the things with spike detection, of course, is probabilistic in nature. And so something that one person may decide is a spike, another person may decide, well, that's not really a spike. And since no detector can match exactly, there's not a ground truth or a gold standard human, spike review allows you to make that determination of, yes, I think that this cluster represents a spike foci, or no, it doesn't, and you can move on. And we're actually going to just mark some to say, well, if we thought these were representative spikes, then we can go ahead and pick those and use them elsewhere in our analysis. So let's go back to that average reference. And again, we can see the EKG channel along the bottom. I'm going to look for the ones that have a deflection here. And I'm also going to look at this in other montages to see if I agree with these. This pretty much disappears when I switch to the other montage. But let's go ahead and go back to the overview, see if there's anything else that looks interesting. Not so much. Again, that's just single channel. Possibly, but it's lined up perfectly with EKG, so I'm less convinced of that. But again, everybody would have a different take on that, because again, it is probabilistic by nature. All right, just in the way of example, let's say we've got some here, and we've decided we want to pick some of these to include for further analysis. So to do that, I just go along and I click on the ones that I want to keep. And again, this is looking at it in this average 17. You can go ahead and switch to different montages if you want. So Main thing though is I've just highlighted some of these. So double clicking zooms in, and then if you double click again, it takes you back out to this individual spike view, and then we can go back to the overview and look at averages. Let's go to final report. These are the 4 that I've selected. Now if I want to save these back to the EEG page, I'll go to Tools and mark groups as vplot comments. Now I've only got one group selected here, so they're going to be all marked as vplot group equals 1. If I had 2 groups, there would be vplot g equals 1 and g equals 2 and so on. So this is the way that you save just the exemplars that you want to keep. So I'm going to sort this in order of by alpha, and I'm going to go ahead and click on these, and you can see these are now marked vplot g equals 1. And those are the 4 that I saved. So the process is, one, of course, we've set up our montages. We pick the appropriate channel map. In this case, instead of the EKG channel being in the default channel map labeled correctly, we selected a different channel map so that EKG to VREF was labeled correctly instead of Z to CZ. And so that resolved that, and we were able to use that EKG channel in deciding whether we were going to mark that or select candidates from that particular spike cluster, or say, well, that cluster's from EKG, and I'm not going to mark that. We went ahead and we picked several from a candidate group, and we saved those as vplot comments, and this is what you can use in the final, in whatever analysis you want to do from there. And I have a separate screencast that goes over the use of vplot. So that's the overview of looking at loading a channel map and double checking to make sure that that EKG channel, if you do have one attached, which is always good, that is assigned to the correct input so that it's not being marked with a scalp channel label, but with a physiological channel label as EKG. Again, any questions, feel free to contact me. Happy to go over this. This is Michael Guest, VP of Research and Clinical Applications for Persyst. Thanks so much.